Hello, everyone, and welcome into the 610 podcast. We've enjoyed bringing you conversation so much that we want to open it up to the listeners. If you want to get in on the conversation, email me at 610podcast, capital PHL, @gmail.com to get your Philadelphia sports questions asked. That's 610podcast, capital P, capital H, and capital L @gmail.com. Now to the conversation. What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into another episode of the 610 podcast. I'm your host, Jay Hollahan, back here talking about Penn State football on this Monday evening. We finally got some time here to discuss the blue-white spring football game, as well as a discussion on KeAndre Lambert-Smith. No longer going to be, at least for the foreseeable future right now, a member of the Penn State football program. So we've got some audio here from James Franklin I want to play for you. First, I'd like to say I apologize in advance if maybe it's a little too much. I'm going to try my best to cut it down. But, I mean, if you listen to the 610 podcast, I typically, for coaches, if you can get like a 30-second clip of them talking, like a minute, 30 seconds, 45 minutes, really, wow, that was a really strong question, whatever. That's awesome. With James Franklin, at certain points, he speaks for over a minute. He gives these long-winded, very detailed responses, and you respect that. I'm not, but there's certain times where you're like, dude, I thought it was over, and then he keeps going for like another 10 seconds. Like, all right, shut up. But no, it's great. It's awesome that the coach doing that. I wasn't doing these audio recordings for the Philadelphia Eagles for Nick Sirianni, so I believe he gives some pretty long-winded answers at times, but for James Franklin, it could be the smallest thing, and he'll just keep going on and on and on. So he does a great job explaining things in depth, so it was very impressive. But yeah, so let's just get to the blue-white game as a whole. It wasn't, I don't think, really much that you can dissect in terms of like, oh, this was terrible, this was that. It's the blue-white spring game. It's a feel as to where we're at, and I thought, we got to see some things from the younger guys that was pretty exciting to look at. And it's one of those things also, right, where it's how much better will these guys look in the fall. Quentin Martin had 2 touchdown runs, and I thought he showed some nice things as well. So, the white team, 27-0 win over the blue team, which obviously shows that there needs to be a little bit more parity. The backups and such. We need to see more from them, because a lot of the times what we see here throughout Penn State is we know it's those backup guys that sometimes really come in and be the difference. I thought Trey Wallace had a great game. 5 catches, put up some nice numbers. He was in and out of being healthy last year, so that was good to see as well. Thought the white defense made some nice plays, picking off Bo Pribula one time, and I think that Bo, it's a little wishy-washy here for him early on, so we want to see him, of course, be better in that scenario, obviously, because you don't want anything happening in that case where he needs to come in and we're having an issue here. Vanover did a good job, and I thought that he picked off a pass. Zeke Wheatley also picked off a pass, so that's cool too. Good to see that as well from your secondary. I was really interested to see how the defense under Allen would do, and I thought, for most of the guys we got to see, they did a pretty good job. But yeah, so you know what? It's the blue-white game. I mean, like I said, there's only so much you can truly evaluate because some guys also didn't play. And we'll hear from Franklin on that too about Nick Singleton and Kaytron Allen did not play in the game. I'm just going to tell you right now, it was nothing to be alarmed at. It was just, kind of wanting to give some other guys a chance. So there was that too. And I thought Andy Kolnicki, I want to see Drew be more accurate. 15 for 32, 202 passing yards. I like the 202 passing yards, and I like the fact that they were getting him out there. It seemed like the offense was moving a heck of a lot better with Drew, but we need to see the consistency this season. That's going to be the big thing, of course, with him. So still evaluating that as well from Coach Kolnicki. So let's start off with James Franklin's really his thoughts for the offense early on in the game and what his takeaways were.
Too many third and longs. Like I said, we got off schedule. But overall, I thought really good. I thought really good. And I was pleased with how we laid a foundation.
All right, so too many third and longs. Yeah, I mean, he cited earlier some pre-snap penalties as well at the beginning of the press conference, but I certainly I air that as well just because of what we saw in the past couple years when the Penn State would get to 3rd down and 6, 3rd down and 8. You never had the feeling that they could get that first down. They could never come away and pick up a big gain through the air because the offense was just so vanilla. It wasn't even funny. It was like, okay, if we get to a 3rd and long situation like that, we're not going to be able to pick up the first down. So now with the new offensive coordinator, let's see if that's going to be different this year. I hope we're not going to be in too many of those really 3rd and long situations. Obviously, you don't want to be, but that does happen throughout the course of a season, obviously, and at times during the game. You want to be able, of course, to pick those up. Now, what will that look like in terms of the development of Drew? That's going to be a totally different thing. So, right now, that's got to be a focal point that they cannot have too many pre-snap penalties, cannot give up too much to where you're in that 3rd and long situation. And obviously you don't want to, but for the sake of, I think, just the confidence standpoint in terms of not hearing, that doubt in your mind, here we go again, we're not going to be able to pick this up. You don't want that to become a situation. So that's early on there. Now, as I said, Kaytron Allen, Nick Singleton not playing. Here is James Franklin on that.
So one of those guys, like a number of guys in our roster, we make decisions no different than we did with Olu Fashanu last year. And then another, so Nick, that was that decision. And then with Kaytron had some bumps and bruises that didn't really allow him. I think if you'd have came to spring practice, I'm not sure if you've been at the weekly press conferences and out at practice, but Kaytron, didn't go this spring. So nothing that is going to be a problem this summer for summer training, nothing that's going to be a problem for next year. But I don't think it's probably a surprise to really anybody in here because I don't think you guys saw him in any of the practices you came to either. So, and Nick, we make modifications. He got a little banged up this week in practice, but we were going to modify him. Spring ball for a lot of guys is an opportunity to move up and be evaluated, but also guys that we feel like have established themselves, especially when we got to figure out who the third back's going to be for next year. That was really kind of the main focus. So we're strategic about that every single year, where guys are at in the program and how established they are. And even when they take reps, we modify some of those guys' reps to get the other guys. Like, to be honest with you, I think you guys know that Drew Shelton, didn't go this spring. Well, that was, really valuable for, Rucci and Javen. They got 1,000 reps this spring, which was great. So some of it is strategic and some of it's just how things play out.
Yeah, great opportunity. Of course, you saw Quentin Mitchell get in there and do some things. Singleton, of course, being a little banged up. Hopefully that's nothing too concerning moving forward. But obviously, that's gonna happen throughout the course of the season. So, I just want to see everything kind of from that point of competitiveness, that third running back spot. That's got to be huge. And I thought Quentin Martin, your 4-star freshman running back coming in, huge to see him go out there and have a good game coming out. And I hope that that's going to be something we get to see from him moving forward. Cam Wallace, I thought, had a pretty good game as well. 3-star running back from last year. Good to see him hit the ground running. No pun intended. But Martin especially, a young back, he's got that size. He's got what you want to see. And you just hope he's going to be able to have that baton passed to him as we move forward here with Singleton and Allen. But that's those two. So I want to go first into the new Big Ten schedule. It's different. Now, this is going to be a long-winded answer from James Franklin. I'm going to do my best kind of to edit it down, but I think there was a lot of really good things he spoke about. So here's him on that new Big Ten schedule with the expansion of the conference.
So I think a couple things, and I think you guys know this. I'm very much focus on the task at hand. Be present. Be where your feet are. 1-0 mentality. You guys have heard that to the point where you don't really want to hear it anymore. I get after 10 years. But I do think there's an aspect to your point that you want to look at these things and have an understanding and awareness. But the challenge is there's so much turnover in college football with coaches that it's kind of hard to make predictions and really get an idea at this time of year who and what you're going to face. And then not only that, the roster can look so different in both directions, back to what you were talking about, Greg. So you got to do some work on that, but we'll pretty much do our 4-game study that we normally do on our first 4 games to get ahead on them. We'll take a look at some schedules, to your point, some games on the schedules with teams that we're not as familiar with, we haven't played before. We will do some of that. But if you're not careful, you're going to spend so much time chasing these ghosts that may not present themselves in week 8 that you mess up week 1. And I know, trust me, I hear it from you guys. I hear it from the fans. I'm very aware of what we need to do. But I'll also say there's a lot of programs that find ways to win games like that and then lose games that they're not supposed to. So it's a fine line, a balance of the amount of respect that you have to pay to both and the challenge and the difficulty of being consistent week in and week out, and then adding the cherry on top and finding a way to win those couple where you're not favored, if that makes sense. So we'll probably keep our approach similar to what it's been in the past, but we'll do some digging on travel plans. Obviously, we got the West Coast travel, which is going to be a big part of our studies, and then just get a general feel for who these programs have been, and then get back to focusing on Penn State and our first couple games.
Obviously, I'm not a huge fan of the conference expanding out west. I don't know how many people really are. I think a lot of people are pretty sad to see that Pac-12 get broken up. I think a lot of people are pretty annoyed with the moving out to the West Coast and with what everything is going on. So that to me is my issue with it is, players, you could be playing 1 week at home and then you got to fly out to USC, play there and then come back home, or you're going out to then like Iowa or Ohio State, and then you've got to play them at the Horseshoe. Like it's so much, and then also, I mean, you're going to hear so much complaining, whining and complaining about why are because I mean the non-conference schedule, there could be times where it's not as beefed up. Well, you're going to get some pretty good opportunities here against good teams in your own conference. And the other thing, too, that is going to be really interesting, the Big Ten Conference is going to be so loaded, and there are going to be so many teams, and they're looking to beat the crap out of each other. I mean, it's not even going to be funny. Those Western Conference teams in the Big Ten, it would not surprise me if one of them doesn't say, all right, time's up. It's time for us to start looking for a different conference to go to, because that's going to be loaded. And hopefully that doesn't happen in the eastern part of the conference as well. But, I mean, it could be a possibility. But, I mean, it's going to be an interesting first year, and hopefully Penn State's going to be able to get through those rough waters. I don't think Washington's going to be as strong as they were last year. Oregon, USC is kind of a toss-up as well. I mean, 3 teams that are replacing quarterbacks, starting quarterbacks, and, UCLA, Chip Kelly leaving. We talked about that to Ohio State. So I just don't know how strong those teams will be, but still that we've got to fly across the country to play those games. That's obviously going to become a factor. I mean, even in the NFL, right? Like, that doesn't happen every year. I mean, think about the Philadelphia Eagles. They don't always have to fly across the country to play in California. They don't always have to fly across the country to play the Seahawks in Washington. Sure, they have to at times go out, but it's not every single year they have to make that trip. So asking collegiate athletes to do that, I think, is so ridiculous. And I think if anyone wants to sit there and say, well, NIL is stupid, well, guess what? Now it's not just, okay, we're only going a couple of hours on a flight to Ohio State. No, now we're flying all the way across the damn country to go play teams like the professional athletes are doing. So, and also trying to be a student at the same time. So that's not making a case for, well, this NIL stuff is getting too out of control. Well, now they're being treated that way with the expansion. So while this might be a conversation for another time, I just want to put that idea out there in a lot of people's heads. All right, so now let's go to the big one. KeAndre Lambert-Smith today, I think it was today, may have been yesterday, is transferring officially. It's been announced he's not, all likelihood, not coming back. Your leading receiver last season, someone that I was really excited to see paired up with Julian Fleming on the outside, won't be coming back. That stinks. That's a huge, I mean, that just stinks. And you know what? It's late in the game to be doing this. Now, whether or not Penn State had an inkling that this could have happened and they could have maybe have gone out there and, brought someone else in, that's a conversation that we want to have further and further down the road. It's interesting to hear what James Franklin had to say early on, because he gave the shortest answer to any of those questions in a moment here. But I definitely think that there's more to this, because unless KLS just wasn't getting what Andy Kotelnicki was throwing out there, which in my opinion I don't get, it seemed like this offense was so much more focused on the wide receivers being able to go out and make plays. I thought that's why they brought in this guy. Now, whether or not that means KLS isn't believing in him, that's a different story. Whether or not things just were going awry there, though, could be a separate one as a whole. All right, so I want to get to James Franklin here being asked about that situation.
Yeah, I'm really happy to talk about any of the guys that played in the game today and are in the locker room. Besides that, I don't have a whole lot to tell you.
Yeah, short and sweet. So that's about it. I got from that it was all likelihood a decision was going to be made very, very soon about whether or not he would be coming back. It's unfortunate. It sucks. I hate that he was I thought a really important part in terms of this offense being in a transition year to now a new offensive coordinator. I thought that would be big. And losing him stinks. It puts a lot of pressure now on Julian Fleming. I thought he and Drew Aller, they created a really good bond last year. And now it seems like, we're going to be trying to find that next guy that's going to be your downfield threat, which, as we know, at State College, it does not grow on trees. Penn State, last couple of years, their recruiting in terms of wide receivers has gone completely down the drain. I mean, it's kind of a joke, when you look at them and you look at Ohio State. I mean, they blow them completely out of the water in the last 5 years. No longer are we seeing your Chris Godwins. I mean, hell, no longer are we even seeing a guy like DeAndre Tompkins that can just stretch the field and be that downfield threat, a possession receiver like Deshaun Hamilton. I mean, Penn State is not recruiting those same guys. Not saying that they need to get a Chris Godwin or a Jahan Dotson, but just the ability to bring on an established receiver in the transfer portal hasn't been there either, and not recruiting these guys either. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. was just in your backyard. So that's going to be a big problem for Penn State this season, is that wide receiver room, and the reporters obviously did a great job noting that, and here they are. And here is specifically James Franklin on that receiver room.
Well, I think like you saw today, a bunch of guys touched the ball and made plays. We were able to distribute the football around. I've had all the faith in the world in our wide receivers in terms of talent and ability. We got to take the next step. And I saw them take a step this spring. We're going to need to take another step this summer. The positive thing is you can really improve defensively and offensively in the passing game over the summer. It's hard to do that in the run game. I think we're going to be very specific on the things we're working on and how we're training and developing. But we have the talent in the room. The reality is we got to take this next step, and we got to do it on a consistent basis, and we got to make plays against all the people on our schedule. So all those guys are in the locker room for a reason. We have belief in those guys. We believe they're ready to take the next step. I think Trey was a good example today. Him getting hurt last year was significant. So having a healthy Trey back is helpful too.
So, I mean, yeah, everything I pretty much just aired, he's confident in them. I don't know how confident he, at the end of the day, truly is, and how much he's really just given lip service to the press. But there you have it. It's going to be something to watch out for as we get into summer. I'm sure it's going to be a big conversation point, as it should. Here's James Franklin on the transfer portal concerns. I want to finish off with this. This is the last one.
For me, that's what these meetings are going to be about. The individual meetings with their position coaches, the meetings with me. We've had some conversations with some guys already. But at the end of the day, you never really know until it happens. I think we got pretty good relationships where guys, for the most part, have been very transparent and honest with us, and we do the same thing with them. One of the things that I think is really important is I'm still a big believer in transformational relationships and college football being transformational. And I'm worried that college football is becoming more and more transactional. And that has to be in both directions. So that's something I talk to our guys all the time about. And to be honest with you, 99% of the time, what's good for the individual is good for the team and vice versa. So that's the good thing that I feel good about as a head coach, that I can have these conversations and be honest, because the reality is more times than not, maybe not in the short term, maybe not in the time that they want it to be in on their schedule, in their mind, but more times than not, it is. We'll include our leadership council in that process. We did that last week. Ask them what they think we need and have them take ownership in those decisions as well and be comfortable with those decisions as well. You guys have heard me say this a ton of times over the last 10 years. For me to make the best decisions for our program, I want to hear from all of them. I want to hear from the players, the staff, and the coaches, and that's including decisions like this. But it's a challenging time in college football. And it's a challenging time for head coaches to make these types of decisions, and the impact that it has on your roster in a lot of different ways and a lot of different ramifications.
So I had to play that full one. Yeah, it was a total moment there where I was like, oh, is he going to kind of lash out at this guy? And he didn't. He answered it very respectfully. But it's a huge issue, and not just college football. It's all of college sports. The NCAA botched it was a total, in my opinion, a total screw job by the NCAA. They screwed the programs. It felt like it was a punishment to the program. And originally it wasn't meant to be that way. I just saw an interesting documentary on Johnny Manziel. It was just meant to be to the point to where kids could make money off their name, image, and likeness in terms of you sell an autograph and you can make money. It wasn't meant to be boosters throwing all this money at guys. It was not truly, in my opinion, meant to be that type of a talking point. And not that I'm against any college athlete making money. No, I thought it was ridiculous that A.J. Green got suspended, or Terrell Pryor, even though he was at Ohio State, got suspended for that. And you see that if you go and watch those Untold Netflix documentaries, you watch the Johnny Manziel, it's almost like watching a movie based off of, like that movie War Dogs, where they kind of had to sneak behind the back of the NCAA and make that happen to where Johnny Manziel could make some money off of his name. And it's just such a problem in college athletics that they're having. And it was just, I felt like NCAA panicked when 2020 came around, and this all happened with NILs. And it had such a domino effect because the transfer portal boomed all of a sudden because kids were getting offers left and right to make these deals. But it specifically started with college football needing to be played in the fall of 2020 for TV deals and for all that. And if you really want to talk about where did this really go awry, that's the first spot you've got to look, 2020 in the COVID year. So that's going to do it for me. This was just a great point to catch up on some of the Penn State stuff. It sucks because, you can't get like 5 episodes in a month to where you can really have a bunch of talking points because it's closed kind of point in the season. It's not like there's extension talks, there's trades being made. We could sit here and just talk about the transfer portal, but hopefully, at some point we can get an interview in at some point and have some stuff for you guys as well. But anyways, thanks everyone for tuning in. We'll have some more stuff as things develop on the KeAndre Lambert-Smith situation. And over the summer, I'm sure that's going to be a big, big talking point, like I mentioned, on the wide receiver rooms. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in. And as always, I'll talk to you next time.